this episode of Sleep and Relax ASMR. This episode is another rendition of the ASMR Critic, and the artist in question whose work we'll be critiquing is Bob Ross, who some would say is the godfather of ASMR. I mean, that's a title that I've given him, and others tend to view Bob Ross as a first example of an ASMR creator. He, of course, didn't say that himself, but his smooth delivery of instructions and little jokes, and how he would read out the color palette like phthalo blue and titanium white, captivated an audience during his time on TV, and his legacy still lives on, as his Joy of Painting series garners millions of views worldwide. On YouTube, for example. So, now, perhaps you've lived under a rock and don't know Bob Ross. Allow me to give you a brief background on this legend. Robert Norman Ross was an American painter, art instructor, and television host. He was a creator and host of The Joy of Painting, an instructional television program that aired from 1983 to 1994 on PBS in the US and in Canada, Latin America, and Europe. Ross went from being a public television personality in the 80s and 90s to being an internet celebrity in the 21st century, becoming popular with fans on YouTube and many other websites after his death. And then, of course, there's a ton of information about him as a painter, but for me, I can give you 20 minutes worth of information on Bob Ross, but at the end, to really understand him, I think you should just watch a couple episodes of The Joy of Painting. And I remember watching it when I was younger with my mom. That was something that we would do together, because it was one of the only things that she could get me to watch that would help me get ready for bed, because I was a very active, energetic child. And I thought it was very interesting how he would kind of create an art scene right before our eyes without much effort, it looked like. And his instructions were, so well delivered and so kind. And he was so gentle about everything that it just kind of would always put me to sleep. So, anyway, total sweetheart of a man, an absolute legend. But how does his art hold up? Time for our critique. The first work of art that we will be exploring and critiquing is titled A Walk in the Woods. Bob sets up our first painting with a lovely scene. It's a lush forest, likely during the fall time, as the leaves and plants are red and gold and purple. But there's this mysterious little path right in the middle of the forest, as if inviting us to take the road less traveled. And it's a beautiful contrast. The almost perfectly outlined path amongst the wild and growing bush and vegetation around it. Bob Ross seemed to prefer to paint these scenes as opposed to abstract work, and I would say that scenescapes are not exactly my preferred type of art aesthetically, but I can appreciate them. it's not my favorite. I personally like settings of like an ocean or lake, and I prefer a cooler color scheme. However, I do like the layout and color choice in this work for what it is. Artwork number 2 is titled Bubbling Stream. Okay, the bubbling stream, yes. So let's set this up first. So here our setting is another forest, possibly during the summertime. Trees and leaves are bright green, awakening from their long winter slumber. The superstar of this artwork is, as you may guess, the bubbling stream right in the middle. The stream starts off center left of the canvas and makes its way down to the bottom center of the canvas, occupying and drawing the viewer's eye into it. There's not a whole lot to critique in this one, but I would say I think it'd be more stunning if this were set over a sunset. I think this could have been a perfect opportunity to show off more artistic chops had the sunset been reflecting at the bottom of the stream, where it bonds together like a mirror reflecting itself. This is me speaking as a totally talentless artist, and I can't even spell my own name and make it look pretty, so it isn't to say that it's bad, it's that I think someone with as much talent as Bob Ross could have taken this to the next level. But we must also remember the show was primarily intended to show folks how to paint without requiring a ton of knowledge or experience, so I do understand the reason for not creating something so visually complicated. So, it's cute, functional, practical art piece that I would have liked to have had a little more complexity for aesthetic reasons. It is still literally 1,000% better than anything I can do during my lifetime. Artwork number 3 is Mount McKinley. Mount McKinley by Bob Ross is more my style, and here's what the artwork features. Or here's the scene that I'm seeing. Spring has arrived. Trees and vegetation are coming back to life. The lake, probably frozen over, maybe, who knows, is alive and flowing, and the setting is ready for spring and subsequently for summer. However, we see Mount McKinley in all of its beauty and majestic presence in the background, looming over the lake and forest below it. The mountain is still capped in powdery white snow, as if in defiance of the new season. I do enjoy this work of art more than the previous two. This is my personal preference, of course. I just happen to find this type of scenery more aesthetically pleasing. I really love the contrast between the large snow-capped mountain looking down on the spring, lively forest, and lake before, or below it, I should say. So, overall, my favorite artwork critiqued so far in this episode. Sunset. Artwork number 4. A scenic auburn sunset falls across a forest and its lake. Bob Ross places us behind some brush so as to not get the full scene of the lake and all of its beauty. Despite me saying earlier in the episode that this type of painting or scenery is not my preferred, I do like this work by Bob Ross. I really enjoy the kind of auburn hue he was able to create. My guess is he used a black canvas to paint this. I'm not an expert, so please don't at me, but I could be totally wrong. But either way, I think there is a very unique quality to this painting that perhaps may be partially attributed to that. It's like watching a beautiful sunset on a film where the lens is changed so as to create a different effect on the viewer. And that's what I'm sort of gathering from this painting. We can appreciate the quietness of the scene without being physically there. The trees are still, as if the water on the lake were just a mirror, you know, just a sheet of glass almost, as if the forest and lake are ready to go to bed, perhaps beginning to snooze already. So I enjoy it. It's my favorite lake scene so far. I don't include Mount McKinley as a lake scene because it's primarily a mountain-centric piece of art, but I enjoy the complexity of Ebony Sunset. I enjoy the vantage point, and I think it's super quality. I think it's excellent. Up next, we have Shades of Grey. Shades of Grey was aired on Season 2, Episode 4. The air date was, let's see here, October 21st, 1983. No, September. Yeah, September 21st. The colors featured include blue, brown, titanium ovide, magic white. Now what's interesting about this painting, and obviously I'll describe it, is it was done with a mixture of blue and brown to create a gray color, and the only other color was titanium white that was used in there, which is really impressive because it features a still lake amongst the mountains with a quiet, cozy little cabin just off the river. You can imagine someone who really appreciates the outdoors and their privacy living here in that little cabin. And you can imagine waking up, making a fire, and perhaps going fishing during the morning, you know, collecting your fish, and then making them at night, cooking them at night, and just living in this kind of pure bliss and privacy. And I love the detail of the mountain reflecting off the river because of just how still and quiet it is. Snow all over the mountains. On top of the cabin, there's some great clouds in the distance, almost giving the work a kind of ominous tone to it. It's great. It's everything I love about Bob these beautiful scenic landscapes. And it's just so impressive how he mixes blue with brown and he gets this, like real-like quality of grayness to his clouds and the scenery. So, I can only appreciate it, as I would likely never be able to accomplish this kind of detail mastery, but I think it is absolutely excellent work by Bob Ross, and it's my favorite so far in the series. So I think we have 2 or 3 left. I think maybe just 2. But either way, the next work of art by Bob Ross that we will be critiquing is Ebony Sea. The painting features the following elements, just so you can envision it, and it's a little bit more complex than the other ones. Clouds, ocean, rocks, grass, trees, a sunset, bushes, and it's on a black canvas. This seascape work of art was created on Season 2, Episode 3, and it air dated September 14th, 1983. The colors featured are titanium white, phthalo green, phthalo blue, Prussian blue, burnt umber, Van Dyke brown, alizarin crimson, sap green, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, and permanent red. In this work, Bob Ross places us on the edge of the shoreline, looking over a lively ocean with waves collapsing against the shore. A purple sunset in the background, purple clouds surrounding the scene. The sun is setting, but you can still place it beyond the clouds. The leaves on the trees pink from the beautiful lavender sunset hitting them, creating a beautiful scene you'd love to see in person. I think it's very interesting because this work is a little different than others. In other paintings we've discussed and critiqued in this episode, Bob Ross usually places us a distance away so that we can kind of see a large overview of the setting. So, for example, in Shades of Grey, or Grey Mist, whatever the actual title of the work was, you can see the cabin clearly on the bottom left of the canvas, with large snow-capped mountains in the background, and the river flowing near the cabin on the right of the canvas. So, the common theme that I can sense is that Bob Ross usually places the viewer far away from the setting so as to not be able to see specifics of each element of the painting, like he places us 100 yards away. On this one, it's not quite the same. On this one, we are basically facing dead on the ocean. We aren't off to the right, seeing the waves lap up on the shores from right to left, crashing on the rocks. Nor do we see a cabin on the left side of the canvas. No, this is straight to the point, like he's placing us directly into a scene. almost just walk up even closer to the shoreline and see ocean for miles. I enjoy the vantage point, and I really enjoy the time setting as well as the colors from this wonderful piece by Bob Ross. And now we make it to the final painting that will be featured on this episode, and it is Winter Sun. Winter Sun was created on Season 2, Episode 2, and it debuted on September 7th, 1983. The colors used are titanium white, phthalo green, phthalo blue, Prussian blue, burnt umber, Van Dyke brown, sap green, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, and permanent red. So yes, the final work of art will be critiquing from Bob Ross. This is a totally different type of painting as well, and what's interesting is the first 4 or 5 paintings that we saw, they kind of all had similar elements. You know, there were landscapes or seascapes that tried to sort of mimic real life. They were something that it wasn't any crazy shapes or colors or, you know, outlandish settings. They were kind of just like he was trying to recreate a beautiful photograph he took from earlier that week. But again, just like the last painting we were critiquing, Winter Sun is totally different. In this painting, the setting is totally laid out in pink, and the only exception is the yellow sun, which shines brightly in the middle of the canvas, clearly demonstrating to the viewer the pink trees and pink lake. And I think it's really beautiful. I think it adds a level of artistic expression and creativity that you don't necessarily find in the other ones. It's very playful. It's very fun aesthetically, really. And I thoroughly enjoy some of the details of this work, such as the reflection of the trees of the lake, as well as the sunset being bright yellow as it radiates from the sun, but past the other side of the trees. Your view of the sunset, it becomes this kind of subdued shade of blue and pink. And again, the setting is kind of similar to almost like the bubbling stream, the painting that we saw earlier. You know, you have this quiet forest with a little lake or pond on the bottom center portion of the canvas, and then between these two pink lively trees, you can see the sunset almost through like a fog. It's kind of reminiscent of a kind of dream, and I really enjoy it. I think precisely because when making these kind of works of art, you know, you can take some creative liberty in terms of how you want to create a scene. And I think for the most part the other works are, again, they're very realistic. You know, it's green trees, green leaves, blue water, you know, a yellow sun in the middle. And this one kind of takes elements of fantasy and incorporates it into an everyday setting, which I think is really nice. It's a very lovely detail, and it's not my favorite, but certainly one that I really appreciate, and I think it's fantastic work by Bob Ross. And that's it. Those were my opinions and critiques of Bob Ross's work. So, if you have another artist or film director or anything that you'd like me to critique, please send me an email to hello@sleepandrelaxasmr.com. That's all for this episode. Thanks as always